Good morning, friends. This is Mrs. Ellis behind the camera, and today I want to talk to you about pollinators. Part of our summer reading program has been focusing on birds and insects, pollinators, and our pets. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to shift our focus to insects and pollinators. Now, I have a very large garden that has a variety of plants, native plants and non-native plants, perennials, trees, shrubs, annuals. And one of the main reasons why a plant has been planted in my landscape is because, of course, it is a pollinator in some sort of way, or it sustains some type of an animal. Whether it's birds, bees, butterflies, humans such as myself, because I have blueberry bushes and I have peach trees and cherry trees. So each plant that's in my landscape supports a habitat that I've tried to help further along. I've just tried to help nature. So here we're looking at pollinators that are on my lavender plants. They start visiting this plant early in the morning, sometimes even before the sun comes up, and they stay out on these plants all through the night, even after the sun has gone down. Sometimes they just sleep right on the plant and wake up in the morning and get right back to work. So we're just going to walk through my garden, and we're going to see what other kinds of plants and pollinators that we might see. I have lots of birds in the landscape, so you'll probably hear some of them in the background. You'll see bees and things buzzing around in front of my camera as I walk along. Here's another really wonderful pollinator plant. It's actually a herb. That's a thyme. That's a creeping thyme, and they absolutely love those. Now what they're gathering is nectar from these plants, and of course once they visit the plant for nectar, they pick up some of the pollen that's on the plant, and they carry the pollen away from the plant on their bodies to the next plant, and that's how pollination occurs. Because they might land on a different plant and the pollen doesn't work because it came from a plant that it doesn't work with, or they might land on the same plant, and then so they deposit some pollen from the same two plants, and then pollination occurs. What we're looking at here is a purple coneflower, and we see many of those growing out in nature because they are what's considered to be a native plant to the state of Virginia. Echinacea is the Latin, and people call them purple coneflower, although they come in a variety of colors. I have some yellow ones, and I have some red ones, and I have purples and oranges. Now this shrub here is not in flower. It's already finished flowering, but this is a wonderful pollinator shrub in that in the springtime it has very small, very fragrant flowers on it. But this is a holly, and of course this is a Burford Holly, and we have native hollies that grow out in our woods that produce red berries in the winter time, or late fall winter, that feed the birds through the winter. So that's another sustaining plant that feeds not only the insects but the birds as well. So as we move along, I'll just kind of pan out. There's an apple tree that feeds me, and there are several other varieties of plants and shrubs that are in my landscape, just a few. So let's move over and through the landscape to some other wonderful plants that are sustaining. We have some little goldfinches. Oh, you can't see because I'm in the sun, but over there's some little yellow goldfinches flying around, and they're visiting some of the plants that are in the landscape. Some of them have finished blooming, so they're eating the seeds. But what I wanted to come to over here is some of our Rebecca, or our brown-eyed Susans, that also are great pollinators. And then we have some mountain mint here. Now this attracts a lot of little small pollinators. Some of them are so teeny you can barely see them, so you have to hold real still, and you can see them bouncing around and moving around. Little teeny small bees. And some pollinators are just these tiny, teeny, tiny insects that you barely even notice, or these teeny, tiny little bees that you barely even notice unless you get up real close and personal with the plant and you just stand and you watch, and you can just see all kinds of activities going on some of their favorite plants while they're gathering, collecting nectar off of these plants and pollinating in the same process. Now, a lot of shrubs and trees in my landscape, of course, were planted for a succession of blooms, which means they don't all bloom at the same time. Some of these plants have bloomed very, very early in the spring and have finished, and they leave seed pods like this peony here. And so as we move through the season, we go from things blooming in the spring to things blooming in the summer. And then there will be things that will bloom in the fall. And we'll also have some things that will actually bloom and flower in the winter, because, believe it or not, there are some insects and birds that need to be fed all through the winter. So we have plants that produce berries for the birds, and then there are some low ground covered plants that flower, that feed some insects that actually feed all through the winter as well. He's a busy bee this morning. So, as you can see, there are a great deal of plants in my landscape because I love, love, love plants, but I also love to watch as birds and bees and butterflies and other insects enjoy visiting my plants and feeding on the nectar. This is a butterfly bush. But not only do butterflies like to visit this bush, so do hummingbirds, and again, very small pollinating insects that like to come and visit. Sometimes an insect or a bird or a bee are attracted to a plant by its color of its flower. Sometimes they're attracted to a plant by its smell, because some of these plants have very strong odors that attract some pollinators and some insects to them. So not only are they attracted by the colors of the flowers, but sometimes they're attracted by the smell of the flower. And I have a great mix of edible things that we as humans can eat, herbs and vegetables. I don't have them all in just one spot. I even have vegetables planted inside the garden with all of my flowers. So now here's a sedum. It's not a native plant, but it's a great pollinator plant. And if you stand real still, you will see all kinds of little teeny tiny pollinators that just absolutely love the sedum flowers. Here is another mint. Now, mints are great pollinators as well. We can use mint in our drinks and dishes and that sort of thing. It's not quite in flower. I'll zoom in. You can see that it's beginning to form a flower bud. And once it starts to flower, the bees just absolutely love it. I like to plant little small, low-growing plants that flower because so many insects and bees really do fly and hover very low to the ground. they're not always up real high in the air. And so they kind of hover down low, looking for those plants that are way down low that nobody pays any attention to or can see them as they're moving around, being busy little bees. Here's a wonderful native plant called a Baptisia. This has finished flowering. It flowers early in the spring. Feeds those early pollinators, but this is a great native plant because in the fall and in the winter it adds interest to a garden because these little things that are left from the flowers here are called seed pods, and when they start to ripen and the seeds begin to develop inside the pods, if you shake them it starts to rattle, almost like some type of a musical instrument. So I not only grow plants for the beautiful flowers, but they also can add a lot of other really great, interesting things to the landscape, things that happen. Now there's a bird in the Viburnum bush. They love those berries that are on that bush. So they visit that a lot, but I'll show you what they've actually been sitting in the tree watching. They come every day and they sit and they watch. Now here's another beautiful shrub that has lots and lots and lots of pollinators on it. This is called the Leaf Hydrangea, and I'll stop talking just to let you listen to all of the bugs that are on here. And right beside it is another native shrub. This is a calicarpa, a purple beautyberry bush, and you can hear the bees are all over it. But what I wanted to show you before we end this video is the little treat that the birds have been watching every morning, just like I have, because sometimes plants feed not only the birds and the bees, but they also feed us. So here are my blueberry bushes that are just loaded down with blueberries. And I have birds that are just waiting for them to get ripe so that they can start to have a little treat. So they come and they sit and they watch and they wait and they talk and they fuss just like I do because I want some too. So, okay, get out. Encourage your mom and dad to get out with you and help you to start a pollinator garden in your yard.